to have you with us on the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, a big war is going on between the social media giants in the United States and the President of the United States. In fact, in an unprecedented way of doing things, President Trump actually signed an executive order to take on the social media giants and the way they go about their censorship policy, making them more liable for legal action. This actually happened after Twitter came out and tagged one of his tweets, and a huge debate about fake news began. But Twitter didn't back off even after the executive order from President Trump. In fact, they went a step ahead and labeled another of his tweets today to say that this content may be inciting of violence. Now, President Trump was actually tweeting about this incident that took place where a man called George Floyd was caught by the police, and there are now accusations of atrocities, the way the policeman kneeled on him and crushed him. The man later died, and it's triggered massive protests in the United States yet again about Black lives. That being said, that may be the on-ground situation. It has reignited a debate even back home about how social media giants go about implementing their censorship policy. Are they really biased? Are they biased towards the left, or are they biased towards the right? Or is it just dependent on who's running the operations in a specific country and what really suits their operations and their business? Twitter repeatedly, viewers, every single time this debate has come about, has said that this is all algorithm based, that they feed in what kind of tweets and comments are not allowed. Then after that, they actually have an entire panel that is set up to look into certain complaints, and then they decide, and there is complete neutrality in the way these decisions are taken. But often you will see people with various ideologies, sometimes the left-leaning, sometimes the right-leaning, are quite unhappy with the way Twitter actually responds to the complaints, or in some cases, blocks out accounts, deletes the tweets, blocks out the tweets, or whatever censorship action they decide to take. So then the debate comes to the point, should there be a set of regulations defining this, a third-party intervention? Should the government of various countries start intervening the way President Trump has? Is his order even legal? Well, that we will find out probably in the coming days, that this case is bound to end up in some court. But let's talk about how it's happening in our country as well and the world over. So let's say good evening to the panelists who are joining us right now. Pavan Duggal, cyber law expert with us this evening. Manu Zakaria, also a cyber security expert. Good to have both of you. Let's also say good evening to Prashant Sugatan, technology lawyer and voluntary legal director at SFLC. And I've also got Mr. Aryama Sundaram, senior advocate of the Supreme Court. Mr. Sundaram, let's begin with you. Last year, in fact, there was a huge controversy about Twitter and Facebook and the way they were going about censoring certain accounts or not. The government got into it, raised some questions. What's your own sense? Should there be a set of regulations? Who decides? Do the giants themselves decide, the private companies themselves? Should the government intervene?
Look, as far as I'm concerned, I feel that any freedom in India is a freedom which is provided by the Constitution. Freedom of speech and expression is an exceedingly valuable right, which is very basic to a democracy and is, according to me, the very fulcrum of a democracy. But at the same time, our Constitution also provides that there can be restrictions on these freedoms for certain reasons: integrity of the state, it can be for the purpose of sovereignty of the state, for public order, for preventing defamation. These are all reasons why you can have a restriction. Now, the point is, if any body is responsible enough to regulate itself in such a way that they do not offend any of these restrictions which are otherwise found in the Constitution, you cannot plead under your right as an intermediary the immunity that you have, that you are not responsible for what is posted on you, if what is posted on you is otherwise violative of factors which the Constitution itself says can be restricted and ought not to be encouraged. So to that extent, I feel a regulation is needed. It can be a self-regulatory body. You must realize two things, that in India, it's one of the few countries, unlike the United States, which constitutionally permits pre-censorship. Now, pre-censorship, like what you find in the films, pre-censorship in films is permitted. However, for example, in media, in the either on television, or I'm not talking about the entertainment channels on television, I'm talking about something like this news channel which is going on. Or if you take any other, like the newspapers, there is no pre-censorship, but there are a set of regulations. There is a press council which looks into these aspects, and by and large, our media behaves exceedingly responsibly in ensuring that they regulate themselves in that way. As of late, there have been a lot of complaints, especially on Facebook, that all kinds of nonsense is posted on Facebook by somebody who wants to just, create some kind of turmoil of any nature, whether it is scandal or whether it is encouraging terrorist behavior or any other reason, or being critical in a defamatory way. All these kind of things are being found, and Facebook then, and Twitter and all these social media, then protect themselves under that disclaimer of, look here, we are not responsible for what goes on. Now, the self-regulation which you expect from them, and they all say, yes, we have, if you have a complaint, you can make a complaint, we will attend to the complaint. Very rarely are those complaints really attended to effectively to curb the mischief. Now, for example, if there is something which comes up which can cause a riot, and that is posted, and a Twitter or a tweet which can create a lot of unrest, communal unrest, it comes on, it results in a riot. Now, at a time like that, to say, look here, freedom of speech, we are not going to interfere with anything, we are not going to regulate, is something which I find erroneous. So to that extent, what has happened in the United States is incongruous, because what has happened there is, it's Donald Trump who has insisted on his right of freedom of speech and has objected that Twitter put in that exclamation mark to say, look, this may not be correct, there could be another view possible. So in fact, it's happened in the reverse way in the United States, but that has led now to a debate as to whether regulations are required. And I believe that if you cannot regulate yourself properly, you need a regulatory commission, and that's my view.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. In fact, let me bring in Prashant Sugatan as well. Prashant, it's also very interesting that Twitter actually gets criticized and accused and blamed by all sides. Nobody seems to be happy with the way the censorship policy is implemented. And almost everybody says, oh, but when so-and-so raised a complaint, when so-and-so was being trolled, abused, or when so-and-so was actually inciting violence, you didn't do anything, but you're doing in this case. So clearly, somewhere there has to be maybe a little bit more transparency in the way social media giants work, or maybe then a special set of regulations is required. What is your view?
Definitely, there has been a lot of criticism the way social media companies control content or regulate content on their platforms. And one response, if you look at how Facebook has been doing with their oversight board, that is one response where they have tried to have some sort of a mechanism in place when these kind of issues come up. For example, like what happened when the Rohingya issue happened in Burma. That was a clear case where Facebook failed to act. So definitely, we have situations where social media companies, these intermediaries have failed to act. But here, what we have in the US is a different situation altogether. Here, we have if you look at the US, you have a law, Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, which gives these platforms the immunity from posts posted by third parties. So that is what the president is trying to intervene and try to dilute now. That definitely can be problematic.
Okay, but so while that is what is happening in United States, and the way they have handled obviously has led to a huge
don't agree
debate.
with that
I'm not
at all.
even too sure, Manu Zakaria, if...
I feel if you cannot...
Yes.
Tanvi, can I just say one thing? I believe if someone like what
Yes,
my friend here was referring to, of Facebook having failed to act, if someone like Facebook finds itself unable to regulate itself, then I believe that such immunity ought not to be granted. And that is where I disagree. I am saying if you fail in your self-regulation, you need an external regulator, and then it's found that you have failed in doing something you ought to have done, why should you have that immunity at all? Now, I think my friend was quoting Facebook. We're talking about Twitter right now, but he was quoting Facebook. Now, if Facebook is allowing something like that, why give them the immunity? Yeah. That is the question. And I think that is what is an area which is a very, very doubtful area, whether this immunity is being got away with as an absolute license of saying, I don't care a damn, let anything be done, let anything be posted. That can never be the issue, and especially not in a country with a constitution like ours.
Yes, so like you said, but in this case, this is reverse. The Twitter did do something and said, well, this is not acceptable.
Yes.
And there was a massive outrage about the way Twitter was clamping down. Mark Zuckerberg, on the other hand, has come out and said that political speech is part of democracy. Political speech is already scrutinized by mainstream media. And there are already, there is enough debate about whether they censor it, how much do they show or don't show, what side do they take. Tech companies are not arbiters of truth. They shouldn't get into it. And he's been very clear about that. Manu Zagaria, do you agree with that kind of a stand that the social media companies are taking? It's not up to us. Why should we be censoring anything, like Mark Zuckerberg says?
There are two things here. The first is the fact-checking and censorship. These are two different things. But when you do a selective fact-checking, it is pure censorship. Now, there are different types of censorship, like pervasive censorship, substantial censorship, selective censorship. Now, the selective censorship is considered to be more dangerous because you are trying to manipulate the truth and permitting the minds of people. So, you're trying to change the facts or, change the way the people think. So there are so many other approaches also followed by most of the social media. For example, there's a term called shadow banning. This is also adopted by people to manipulate their agenda or, to impose their agenda. So I think, there has to be a policy, like one of the panelists said. If they're not regulating themselves, there has to be a framework which reviews or follows up this, and, some form of framework is there in place.
Okay, so let's look at it in two different points. And actually, you're right. And I was going to just break it up into two different aspects, Pawan Duggal. One is, obviously censoring or cracking down on content which could be hate speech, which could be fake news, which could just simply incite violence or, hurt people's sentiments. That's one. The other debate then happens about, political views, political activism, and to what extent do you respond to that? Are we blurring the line somewhere, and are social media giants mixing all of this up?
Well, today is the age of convenience, and social media companies have quickly chosen the convenient way to become as glorified spectators while mayhem happens on their network. That's been possible thanks to, of course, the immunity that's been provided in the US by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That's been made possible in a country like India, despite the law saying otherwise. The law, being Section 79 of the Information Technology Act, requires these companies to exercise due diligence and to take various parameters to prevent these kinds of publication of unwarranted content. But a majority of these social media companies are very conveniently hiding behind the judgment of the Supreme Court in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. In that landmark judgment, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutional validity of Section 79 of the IT Act and the IT rules, but told these social media companies, hey guys, you're going to get lakhs of requests for removal of content. Please don't do anything. Sit pretty. Wait till such time you get a court order or an order from a governmental agency, and then you start acting. Now, that particular portion of the judgment has been very conveniently twisted and misinterpreted by the social media companies to now say that, look, I can hardly do anything. You get me a court order. And in a country like India, where this kind of unwarranted speech is happening very frequently, trying to get a court order would be a long, drawn-out process. So it's going to be self-destructive and a self-goal from the word go. Also, the fact is, trying to get the governmental agencies to start acting on these social media companies is a big nightmare. So I believe this entire Indian approach on intermediary liability is defective, has not really served either the objectives and the principles of the Indian cyber law, nor has served the interest of the Indian citizens per se. It's very convenient to say that, look, we are doing self-regulation. But in the name of self-regulation, not doing anything is also a convenient way of, shall I say, escaping liability. I believe the liability has to now go on to these service providers. I believe time has come for India to amend its
Absolutely
law on
correct.
intermediary liability and make them completely liable. They cannot just go scot-free and say, look, my house is on fire, but I'm roaming in the park because I have been told by your Supreme Court to roam in the park. I believe that approach has to go off. So the quicker the government amends the Section 79 of the IT Act, the better. Alternatively, the government has an option today. In the evening today, the government can come up with new rules and regulations under Section 87 of the IT Act, mandating these guys so as to do what specific stuff and what steps to take so as to prevent the dissemination of these kinds of unwarranted content. But all ultimately is going to be dependent on political will, whether we have the political will to bite the bullet, whether we have the will to walk the walk, and whether these kinds of big giants have a huge power and clout to prevent these kinds of legislative processes. It's all a question of time, but all eyes will be on the government because now this is a very pertinent debate which is no longer just limited to the US, but has direct effect because in India, people have begun to start seeing that they are not getting justice, not getting effective remedy from these social media companies. You try complaining to a Twitter or a Facebook if you're a normal person, and you quickly start realizing that lo and behold, it could either be kept in a long period of waiting, or you may not get effective remedy. So a harmonious balance will have to be maintained. I'm not saying make them completely liable, but I'm also not saying give them a carte blanche, a kind of a blanket license to look the other way while complete violations of law take place on their network.
Okay,
I would add
so
to that
here
by
is the question
saying
then:
that
how
if
do
it
we
is
ensure?
found that some
Yes.
some content was on which they had permitted, and it is found that content was in some manner unconstitutional, illegal, or unlawful in India, then I feel they should be held liable and that immunity should be taken. Because otherwise, they are just escaping any responsibility by saying, you post whatever you want, tweet whatever you want, put anything on Facebook you want. I don't care what it is. I just sit pretty and I make my profits out of it being a successful social media network. And that's it. I want to make my profits. Nobody can do that. And I feel if it is found that something there ought not to have been there, they must be held responsible and they cannot escape.
Okay, so here is my question, and Mr. Sugatan, maybe we can begin with you. Who decides what ought not to be there? Many of the debates and instances that have cropped up on and do crop up on a weekly basis nowadays on social media are actually quite subjective in that sense.
Definitely, there cannot be a case that social media companies don't control or regulate. Definitely, there is a need to regulate content on social media. That is what almost all intermediaries have said. They have their terms of service, their code of conduct, and based on that, they regulate the content. Yes, in some cases, that is not sufficient. That is what I was referring to earlier when I referred to Facebook's oversight board. So Facebook has come up with this oversight board mechanism. This is something which also other companies can also look at based on how this functions. Yes, there is a need to regulate content, but that doesn't mean that any content which goes up online, the intermediaries can be held liable. This has already been discussed by the Supreme Court, held by the Supreme Court in this very single case, where the court said, yes, they cannot be held liable unless they don't, let's say, act on a court order or an order from a government agency. So these debates have already taken place. It has already been decided by the Supreme Court. And if we have the internet working the way we have it today, it is because of the protection, the safe harbor protections offered by legislations like the Communications Decency Act in the US and Section 79 in India. There are similar provisions in the EU also. So these safe harbor provisions have been well thought out by the legislatures of the respective countries.
Okay,
To then intervene,
Manu
if I
Zakaria,
may.
would you want to weigh in on this as
The
well?
Supreme Court was interpreting.
Yes, Mr. Sundaram, of course, and then I'll go to Manu. Yeah.
May I say something? The Supreme Court interpreted Section 79
Yes, please.
as it stands. Supreme Court was dealing with it qua the Constitution and the section itself. If we find that with this kind of protection, these social media companies, these intermediaries, are not being responsible and are allowing content to be aired on them which should not be on them, and we find that they are not able to self-regulate themselves, what we are discussing is the need of an amendment to the Act. The Supreme Court was interpreting and was dealing with Section 79 as it stood. But if self-regulation is not possible and external regulation is necessary, and that external regulator can call these people and haul them up for it if they do not exercise their due diligence. So, and the Act should be amended accordingly.
No, so I was going to ask exactly on that, and so maybe you can answer the question and then I go on to other panelists. What is the suggestion for this external regulator? Who is going to be this external regulator?
Well, an external regulator here should be considered an impartial body, and I believe that in this country, people have had a lot of criticism about the nature of the appointments of such persons, whether it's a CBI director or anybody else. Every government claims, every opposition claims it's a government's handpicked choice. But usually, the regulators can be chosen. The people involved in such a decision would usually be the Prime Minister, would be the leader of the opposition, and could be the Chief Justice of the High Court. Now, if three of them were to decide on this, then the regulator can be considered a truly independent body.
Okay, Manu Zakaria, would you want to weigh in on that? Because, and I keep coming back to this. Say that everybody agrees that the social media giants, Twitter, Facebook, aren't doing enough in terms of regulation. There are question marks about the way it's done, if it's neutral, not neutral, a very opaque way of doing things. We need a third-party regulator. We need some change in laws as well. Who should be this regulator? The question of neutrality of that regulator itself will then become a big talking point.
Yes. So the first thing that we need to understand is what is valid in India may not be valid in some other country, or the context changes and vice versa. So something that is very local to the Indian, system has to be, maybe we have to build in from scratch. Independent authority or a lawmaking has to be there, which will filter or which will review the contents of the social media postings, and the decisions taken by these platforms is what we need. Like the panelists said, a neutral body consisting of the Prime Minister or Chief Justice, or somebody who's good in analyzing these content, because we know that information is extensively used in the cyber warfare. So many places it has been extensively misused, I would say. So this is very, very crucial. So we need a very high level team, independent team, to review this platform.
Okay, Mr. Pavan Duggal, would you want to weigh in on this as well, on the way to go forward? Honestly, like and Manu Zakaria said, the context is different, the way it pans out is different for every other country. In India, what could be the way forward then? Hopefully not the way United States has gone about it.
Well, the way forward for India has to be very clear. Number one, we have to force these social media companies to comply with Indian cyber law. Currently, they're only doing lip service with Indian cyber law. Currently, most of the compliances are not yet done when you look at on their websites, on their terms and conditions. And currently, they're all hiding behind this so-called cloak of statutory protection from immunity under the Supreme Court judgment. Well, I think it's time that the Shreya Singhal judgment needs to be redefined and re-explained. It's time that the government makes a test case against some social media company, because with so much of volume of fake news coming in, and it's going to be very, very difficult. And ultimately, if we are not going to handle these guys properly, such kind of an efforts could prejudicially impact not just the security, sovereignty, and integrity of the country, but even its cyber sovereign interests per se. So the question is, what needs to be done? Yes, they need to be made amenable to regulation. Number two, an independent regulation a regulator is a great idea, but they will say, look, India is such a huge nation. You can't have one regulator. State-wise regulators, I can't keep on going to each state. Even otherwise, trying to get them to comply with normal court orders in India is also such a tall task because they find some way or the other to bypass it. I think the message that the government needs to give is very clear. You are welcome to come and take all the benefits of this huge Indian market of 1.35 billion people. But please remember, we want you to comply with Indian law, not just in letter, but in spirit as well. We want you to be making effective remedies available to affected persons who are affected by this kinds of unwarranted speech or messaging that's happening on your platform. And time is of essence. You can no longer say that I will take my own sweet time or that I will use community standards of the US to determine the community standards of India and then decide your appropriate application. I think these players have to quickly realize that they have to start indigenizing their thought processes. They will have to start complying with Indian law. But because Indian law has never really shown them the deterrent teeth, they have begun to get habituated to the fact that they can actually bypass and not comply with Indian law. Strong deterrent messages has to be the need of the hour as far as the government is concerned.
All right, let's see if this debate that's now been reignited actually brings in some changes and brings in the law and perhaps a more neutral solution as well to ensure that there is a proper regulation, more transparency, more accountability, even on the social media sites. And we don't get into these debates again and again of whether Twitter is being biased towards one side or the other side, or not explaining why some accounts are blocked but the others are not, why some trolls are actually thrown out but the others are not. Several debates have happened in the past few years. I think it is time that we use the example of United States, not go down the same path, chart our own path, but ensure we have a good set of law and some amount of accountability even for our social media companies. Thank you to all of our guests for joining us this Friday evening. Welcome back, viewers. We've been bringing to you constantly the reports from various parts of the country about the plight of our migrants who for weeks have been on the streets. For 2 months, they have been jobless, dependent on others to give them money or food, and then dependent on the governments to give them transport to go back home. Thousands of them gave up and began to walk on the streets. Even now, even almost a month after the government decided to begin the trains, after 3 weeks of trains running across the country, the migrant mess goes on. And we got you those reports. But tonight I thought, let's also take a moment and speak about some people and speak with some people who've actually stepped up, who've gone out of their way to help people during this lockdown. And so we've got a set of very special guests joining us and you know, from various walks of life. I have a star athlete, an Olympian. I have a very famous actor. I have an top lawyer and alumni of NLS. I also have a mushroom farmer. People from various parts of the country joining me right now because they stepped out of their way to help people in need. And tonight we're going to talk to them about the work they've done and the stories that they have to share with us. First up, let's say good evening to Jyoti Chand as well as Sonu Sood joining me right now. We will also have Neeti Goyal, Sonu's a friend who's been helping him. And I don't need to tell you all the amount of work that all of them have actually been doing. It's all over media. It's all over social media. The great work that has actually been done. Jyoti Chand, let's begin with you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. How and when, did you decide that you want to step out and help some people, arrange food for them and just lend a helping hand?
नमस्ते बेसिकली देखेंगे तो अभी
ड्यूटी चंद जी धन्यवाद नमस्ते हमसे बात करने के लिए जी जी
हाँ तो अभी कोरोना वायरस के लिए पूरी दुनिया बंद है और इसी बंद के मुकाबले सब हर इंसान कर रहे हैं तो बेसिकली हमारे गांव में तो 5,000 से ज्यादा लोग रहते हैं और हमारा जो काम है कपड़ा बना के जो पैसा कमाते इसी में परिवार चलाते। लेकिन अभी लॉकडाउन वजह हमारा जो भी कपड़ा बना रही है सारा सेलिंग नहीं हो रहा है। हमारा गांव के सारे जो गरीब लोग हैं गरीब से गरीब हो रहा है तो मेरे को मन में ख्याल है कि मैं इसी गाँव में पैदा हुआ है, तो इसी गाँव के लिए कुछ करना है। तो इसलिए भुवनेश्वर में रहती हूँ, तो गाँव जाके बेसिकली जो गरीब आदमी रहते हैं, जो पूरा गर्मी जिसका इनकम कुछ नहीं है, तो इनको 15 दिन का राशन दिया मैंने खाने के लिए। और इसके साथ लड़कियाँ लोग का जो पीरियड्स होता है, इनको पैड भी मैंने डिस्ट्रीब्यूट किया मैंने।
जी। और ये क्या आपको लगता है दूती चंद जी की हम लोग की ये ड्यूटी है और काफ़ी लोग ये भूल चुके हैं एक्चुअली कि उन्हें भी मदद करनी चाहिए, जैसे आपने बोला कि आपके गांव में काम करते हैं, वहीं रहते हैं, इस लॉकडाउन के समय में उनकी मदद करनी चाहिए, पर बहुत लोग ये नहीं कर रहे हैं। आज सरकारें भी उन्हें भूल चुकी हैं और सोसाइटी के लोग भी उन्हें भूल चुके हैं।
सबसे पहले सबको यही कहूँगी, अभी तो बुरे वक़्त चल रहा है, ये सिर्फ़ एक ही का नहीं है, ये सब लोग के लिए। तो सबको हमको कुछ ना कुछ किसी को मदद करना चाहिए इसी मुद्दे में, क्योंकि हर इंसान का सब सेम नहीं रहते और गवर्नमेंट तो पदक्षेप ले रहा है। इनके हिसाब से जो-जो चीज़ ज़रूरी है, वो गाइडलाइन जारी किया है और गवर्नमेंट भी इनके तरफ से भी हेल्प किया है लोगों को। लेकिन बहुत लोग ऐसे हैं जो गवर्नमेंट का हेल्प नहीं मिल पाते इनको। तो हर इंसान को यही कहूँगी, हमारे पास कुछ ना कुछ है जो हम दूसरे को मदद कर सकेंगे। और ऐसी बुरे हालत में किसी को मदद करेंगे तो भगवान हमको दुआ देंगे। तो वही है, मैं सबको यही बोलूँगी, इसी मुकाबले में हमको सब मिलके करना पड़ेगा और हम सबको मदद करना पड़ेगा।
जी, आपकी कुछ बातचीत हुई जब आप गए वहाँ खाना बाँटने के लिए और आपने उनको मदद की, उनको फूड पैकेट्स दिए, तो क्या आपकी उन लोगों से बात हुई? क्या बताया उन्होंने आपको?
मेरे गाँव वाले तो सब मुझे देख के बोला कि "द्युति तुम तो बहुत बड़ी एथलीट बन चुकी हो और अच्छा इंसान भी बन चुकी हो, लेकिन हमारे गाँव के लिए कुछ करो क्योंकि अभी लॉकडाउन के वजह पूरी दुनिया में अभी बंद है। हम घर से बाहर नहीं निकल पाते। हमारा जो इनकम हो रहा था हर मंथ में जो 4000 5000 अभी तो 2 महीने से लॉकडाउन चल रहे हैं और हमारा जो सामान जो बना रही है इसको भेजने में से भी कोई लेने के लिए नहीं आते और जो भी लेने के लिए आते हैं वो जितना प्राइस है इनके पूरा 50% प्राइस में लेने के लिए बोल रहे हैं, जो हम देंगे तो कोई फ़ायदा ही नहीं है। और इसी वक़्त में हमको मदद करने के लिए कोई भी नहीं है। तुम अकेले लड़की जो हमारा विलेज के लिए सहारा बन सके, तो आपके हिसाब से कुछ मदद देना है तो दे सकते हो। तो फिर मैं हमारा जो किट का जो फाउंडर है डॉक्टर अच्युत सामंत सर, इनसे मैं मदद माँगी कि सर मेरे विलेज में ऐसा-ऐसा बहुत सारे आदमी है, तो इनको कुछ मदद करना चाहती हूँ, तो आप थोड़ा मुझे हेल्प करेंगे तो मैं कुछ मदद कर सकेंगे हमारे गरीब लोग को। तो फिर किट का जो फाउंडर है डॉक्टर अच्युत सामंत सर, उन्होंने मुझे हाथ मिलाया मेरे साथ। उन्होंने तरफ से भी मुझे कुछ मदद दिया जिसको हम दोनों मिल के फिर गाँव में जाके विलेज में 3000 लोगों को मैंने सूखा वाला खाना और उसके साथ राशन भी 15 दिन का मैंने सब बाँट के आई मैंने।
सूजी चंद जी, धन्यवाद हमसे बात करने के लिए और धन्यवाद ये जो आपने काम किया है और जैसे आपने लोगों की मदद की है। हम यही चाहेंगे कि आपकी बात सुनकर और लोग भी आएँ और मदद करें उनके आसपास जो लोग फंसे हुए हैं, घर नहीं जा पा रहे हैं, जिनके पास अभी पैसे नहीं है, काम नहीं मिल रहा है, उनकी मदद करें। धन्यवाद हमसे आज बात करने के लिए। लेट मी ऑल्सो से गुड इवनिंग टू नीति गोयल एंड Sonu Sood who's joining us right now. Sonu, you've truly become a star of another kind with all the work that you've done. The way you've been responding to people who are reaching out to you from various parts with their own personal problems and they're seeking your help. Give us an insight into how did this all begin? At what point did you decide that this is something that you need to do?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show. But it all started when we all were stuck in our lockdowns, and there was a hotel that I had in Juhud. That's the first thing that I gave to these paramedical staff. And me and Niti as team, we were distributing ration, a lot of food to a lot of people, almost 45,000 count we had every day. And one day we were on the highways and we came across these migrants who were walking, towards their villages. And we asked them, I said, where are you heading to? They said, we are going to our village, which is Karnataka, and we are going to walk 700 kilometers. But somehow, we were able to convince them that just stop and just give us 2 days to get all the permissions. And I had to use my good offices to speak to my friends, and we got the permissions for Karnataka. And that's the first time almost 350 people left for Karnataka with proper permissions, and the smiles on their faces, the tears in their eyes said everything. I said, we are not going to stop for these 350 because there are millions waiting on on the highways of this country, and we have to get in touch with everyone. So this is how we started contacting them, and now it's like a huge responsibility on our shoulders till we make the last migrant reach back to their home.
Yes, in fact, I was going to ask this. The entire process is going to be very difficult. Neeti, if you want to come in on that part, the coordination. Our governments right now are struggling with it. The local administration is overburdened. There's a lot of communication gap. Permissions are required. In-depth planning is required. Neeti, how did you all go about it? Tell us about some of the challenges that you faced.
So it was a very curbsome process, and we were actually discuss about for the first set of permissions to come. We worked about 20 hours a day. There was a whole list which had to be compiled, and we had to get the medicals done of all the migrants who were traveling. And then the report was sent to the district from where they wanted to go. The district magistrate would say that yes, they belong to my village or whatever. And then we get a NOC. Then after the NOC, the state government issues a permit that, okay, we will accept them in the state and they can come back. And when the final travel permit from Mumbai is issued by the DCP, long in a curbsome process. And I think me and Sonu have been working almost 18 to 20 hours every day to make this happen. And it was not easy at all, actually.
I can imagine it's not been easy at all. Sonu, since, obviously a lot gets talked about the amount of work that you all have done. Is there a count by now? How many people have you managed to get them to their homes? And if there are any interesting stories about what people have told you, if any of them have reached home and, messaged you back to tell you, how the experience was?
Now I think more than almost 15 to 16,000 people, have been helped to reach home, and there's a huge list of almost 70 to 80,000 still. We need to figure out how to make them, get reunited with their families. But I would say every day is a challenge. Today we had hundreds of people, leaving for places in Bihar, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, and me and Neeti were there in Wadala in the evening. But I'll tell you that every single phase in the bus, they have so much of energy. They said, from past 2-3 months we were without food and we were stuck, and now we're going back to your homes. So I think doesn't really matter that we work for 20 hours a day, but this is the first time we are feeling that 24 hours in a day is less. Wish we had almost 30 hours, and we could help some more migrants reach back to their homes. So it's a challenge every day, but like I said, I feel every day. I think this is the reason I came to this city. Okay, I'm an actor. I'm going to still do a lot of films, but this was something I have enjoyed the most, and bringing a smile on one individual, I think is the most satisfying experience ever I've experienced.
From your own industry, has your work inspired more people? Have there been more, people from the film industry who've stepped up and said, okay, we also want to be a part of what you're doing right now?
No, yes, a lot of phone calls, messages. They congratulated me personally that you have done really something which was, I would say, impossible task. But now since you're doing it, we are with you. And you need anything, please let us know. Like a very good friend, Farah, she got a lot of water for us to give to all the people who are traveling. Then a lot of messages from my fraternity friends who said, I think only you could make this possible, because since I work with them, they know that I'm good at making calls and making things work. So I feel that there's some kind of booster that you get from these colleagues that motivate you to wake up early and again get back on the job. I wish we can make every single person go on the same day. But we are on, at least the best part is that the trust they have now built on us is that they'll wait for 2-3 days. It's not that they're running, they are going to walk down. They said, okay, sir, we'll wait for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, a week also, but we know that we'll go because you have assured us. So I think that's more than enough. And this is not just Mumbai, but across the, I would say, the country. And today is the best example when, me and Niti, we received a message on my social media, and it was about almost 170 girls stuck in Cochin. And they wanted to come to Bhubaneswar. And since everything was, the borders was locked down and, no one could move. So we decided why not to fly them off and to Bhubaneswar, and we opened the Cochin airport and the Bhubaneswar airport for 2-3 hours, and these 170 odd girls were flown into Bhubaneswar, and they had all tears in their eyes, and I think that was one of the most special experiences we could ever imagine.
So you mentioned a few names who have stepped up and also helped you and supported you and brought, sent across water or food, but in some ways, Sonu Sood, do you feel that perhaps the industry and the biggest of the stars could have done a lot more in the capacity that you're doing? Much appreciated, and so many others can do it. I mean, after all, let's also admit the fact that the industry itself has people, workers, crew members who come from various parts of the country. They themselves are in big trouble today. Shoots are not happening. Film work is completely shut. TV work is completely shut. They also need help. But do you feel sometimes disappointed that not much has happened from the big names of the industry?
No, I'm sure everyone must have done their bit in the way they prefer. But like I said, coming out in open, I would say it's not easy. You have to convince your families that, okay, you're going to go out. You are going to move among thousands of people every single day. And there's a huge risk. But I always believe that, till you don't give that personal touch, till you don't convince them, okay, you're one of them, they are not going to believe you. And we could manage to do it sitting in Mumbai, where, the message spread across the globe, across everyone in India, that, okay, if we make a call anywhere in the country, they can make us go back to homes. But like I said, the whole industry must be doing their bit. But like I said, it's not easy to come out and be with them. So I can totally, accept that.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard of a few of the big stars raise funds and begin some kind of fundraising initiatives. That being said, there is enough money available within the industry, within the big stars and the star families, that could have very well been used. Thousands of these people, and they're still there. I mean, as much as you are able to do, I think we will need at least 20 more Sonu Soods and Niti Goyals to come together to ensure that all of these people get home. Today, our reporter was there in Vasai. There are hundreds of them who've been kicked out of this one ground where they'd been camping, waiting for the trains. The trains have been cancelled for the next 4 days, so they don't know when they will get the next train. There is no way to go back from wherever they came from. They have no money, no food. Wouldn't you want to make a larger call to your own colleagues, Sonu, to say, please come out and we need your help here? I know what's happening. I'm seeing this on ground.
I wish I could do that, but yeah, I've got calls from a couple of my friends, and very encouraging messages and all. But yeah, people want to do it. There are a couple of producers, directors, they have come up and they said, we want to be part of it. There's a friend, Shabina Khan, Tabu, Ramesh Surani ji, and Farah, like I said. There are a lot of people who said that, we want everyone to reach back home. But I would say, the kind of damage that has been done because of this, I would say the whole fraternity has to come out and, convince them, okay, just stay, we are with you and we'll make you go back to your home. So I know it's not an easy thing to do it because everyone is stuck in their homes. They have their families, they have their kids, they have their elders. But yeah, we are in a situation. So maybe I was lucky enough that God chose me and of course Niti to take care of that. And I promise you that we as a team also we have done which hundreds of other, I would say, institutions wouldn't have been able to do it. We have a whole system. We have a call center, which is totally, dedicated to it. Around 10, 12 friends of us, my chartered accountant teams, Neeti, her team, everyone is into it. And I'm so happy that, Vidhu, Chopra sir, in fact, I yesterday spoke to him, and he has come forward to, support us. So, like I said, the message is there with everyone, and I'm sure this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, and I'm sure, when we meet next again on the channel, there'll be 100 more names who will be there for these migrants.
Oh, I hope so. I absolutely hope so that happens. And thank you so much. And all of our good wishes to you and to Neeti. I can imagine it's not an easy job, but it has to be done. And many more should come out and do it to as much as they can to their own capabilities. I'm glad that you and Neeti have actually taken this on. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing in helping these people get to their own hometowns. Sonu Sood and Neeti Goyal joining us there and speaking to us. Let me move on. I also have two more very, very special guests, a farmer from Delhi and a lawyer, part of a group from National Law School of India alumnus who've also done taken a very interesting initiative that I want them to share with us. So, Shail, let's begin with you. Shail Trehan joins us this evening. You all decided to pool in money and charter a flight for the migrants. Do tell our viewers, how this idea came about and how many people were you able to help?
So the idea came about because we were discussing on our WhatsApp group, which was the batch of 2000 from National Law School alumni. And in our batch, what we could do, everyone seeing horrific images in the media and everyone was feeling helpless, but we decided we were not going to be helpless. So we started off by wanting to charter a bus. And when we did the math on the bus, it turns out that we were paying approximately 5,000 rupees a person for a bus from Mumbai to either UP or Bihar, which should not happen, firstly, but that's what the pricing is right now. And because of all the permissions, and like Sonu was saying, it's very difficult and tedious to get the permissions to run the buses, and the pricing has become much higher. And one of our batchmates is the general counsel with Tata's, and he said, but you know what? I mean, for marginally more, we can fly more people than we would on a bus. So 180 people is what we could fly on the plane. We took a full plane load of 174. And when we did that, the equivalent would have been hiring 5 buses. So it was also, to us, important that we get people home as soon as possible, as safely as possible. And so that's what we did.
Oh, okay. That's very, very interesting, and I hope more people actually, come up and do such things. So, Shail, just stay on with me. I have also got Mr. Papan Singh Gehlot joining me from Delhi right now. Mr. Gehlot is actually a mushroom farmer, and he helped 10 of the people who worked for him to go back home, and he got them plane tickets. Gehlot जी, ये जो आपने काम किया, ये बहुत ही अच्छा था कि उनके लिए आपने ऐसे टिकट खरीदे और उनको घर भेजा. किस समय आपने ये डिसीजन लिया और क्यों ये आपने डिसीजन लिया कि आपको उनकी इस तरीके से मदद करनी होगी?
जी मैडम, मेरा मशरूम का जो काम है वो सीजनल है और वो मेरा 28 मार्च को ख़त्म हो गया था. मेरी कुछ लेबर निकल गई थी, तो लॉकडाउन के बाद मैंने इनका खाना वाने का तो सब ध्यान रखा ही था. लेकिन जहाँ तक एयर टिकट का सवाल है, तो इनको 2 महीने बाद 2 महीने हो गए लॉकडाउन में फंसे हुए. तो जो बसेज जारी थी लीगल रूप से भी या इलीगल रूप से भी बाई रोड, तो आपके माध्यम से चैनल से पता लगता था कि बहुत से एक्सीडेंट हो रहे हैं और कम से कम 40-50 मजदूर एक दिन के रोड एक्सीडेंट में मर रहे हैं. उसके बाद हमने श्रमिक ट्रेन में इनका ऑनलाइन रजिस्ट्रेशन कराया, तो 23 तारीख तक इनका उसमें भी कोई मैसेज इनको नहीं आया. उसके बाद जो ट्रेन खुली, उसमें एसी क्लास की चली थी पहले, उसमें मैंने बहुत कोशिश की, लेकिन उसमें भी 15 जून से पहले कोई टिकट नहीं थी. तो फिर उड्डयन मंत्री जी ने ये घोषणा कर दी कि घरेलू उड़ान 25 तारीख से चलेंगी, तो मेरे मन में ख्याल आया कि ये मज़दूर भाई हैं तो इनको बाई इज्जत बाई सम्मान पूर्वक इनके गांव में एयर टिकट की बुकिंग करके मैं भेज दूं। तो एयर टिकट मुझे 28 तारीख की सुबह का इंडिगो एयरलाइन का 6 बजे की फ़्लाइट का दिल्ली टू पटना का मिल गया। इसलिए मैंने इनको फ़्लाइट में जो मेरे मज़दूरों को किसी प्रकार की परेशानी ना हो जाए, तो इसलिए मैंने बाई एयर इनको भेजना उचित समझा। जी मैडम।
जी, और ये जी आपने ये जो है बहुत ही अच्छा बड़ा काम किया। क्या वो लोग आपको बोलते थे घर पे क्या हालत है, उन्होंने क्या सोचा था कि कैसे वो घर जाएंगे अगर आप उनकी प्लेन के टिकट्स के साथ मदद नहीं करते, और क्या अभी उनसे बातचीत होती है कि घर पे सब कैसा है और वापस आने का क्या प्लान है?
देखिए मैडम, ये लॉकडाउन में मेरे खेत में ही थे, 2 ट्वेल है मेरे, तो मैं सुबह शाम इनके पास जाता था। और जो ये दृश्य चलते थे आपके टीवी पे, रोड पे निकल रहे हैं, नंगे पैर हैं, भूखे हैं, प्यासे हैं, एक्सीडेंट हो रहे हैं, इससे मैं बड़ा गर्वित होता था। तो इनको मैं सांत्वना देने के लिए, हालांकि मैं इनके घर भी पैसा भिजवा दिया था, इनका हिसाब भी भिजवा दिया था, उसके अलावा भी इनके अकाउंट में इनके घर में मैंने लगवा दिया था, लेकिन मुझे डर लगा रहता था कि किसी के बहकावे में आकर ये भी कहीं बैग उठा के रोड पे ना चले जाएं और कुछ मिस हैपनिंग हो जाए तो मैं अपने आप को क्षमा नहीं कर पाऊंगा। इसलिए मैं इनके साथ बैठ के पूरे संसार की और अपने देश के हालात बताता था और इनको मैं विश्वास दिलाता कि जैसे भी सामान्य स्थिति होगी या सरकार जो सुविधा करेगी, तो मैं जितनी जल्दी सुविधा होगी उतनी जल्दी अच्छे तरीके से भेजूंगा। मैं नहीं चाहता कि मेरे मजदूर किसी तरह तड़पते रोते बिलखते हुए, जैसे इस सड़कों पे मुझे दिखाई देते हैं, मेरे लेबर ऐसे रोते बिलखते हुए नहीं जाए। ये मैंने उनको वादा किया था। फ्लाइट का मेरा वादा नहीं था, तो लेकिन बाद में फिर फ्लाइट मेरे को सबसे अच्छा ये लगा कि इनकी एक ज़िंदगी में पहली यात्रा भी हो जाएगी और ये बाई शेप भी चले जाएंगे। जी मैडम।
ये बहुत ही बढ़िया काम किया आपने गहलोत जी, और धन्यवाद कि आप आए और आपने अपने जो आपके लिए काम करते हैं लोग, एटलीस्ट उनके बारे में सोचा। अगर सभी देशवासी ये करने लगे तो हमारी प्रॉब्लम बहुत जल्दी सॉल्व हो जाएगी। वेरी क्विकली शेयर विद यू ऑल्सो, यू नो, इज देयर ए थॉट टू initiate more of these projects to, you know, see how else you all can help people who are stuck in various places?
So we've already got our second plane leaving on Sunday. It's been sponsored by the Godrej Group. So it's moving faster than we expected, actually. We've been flooded with calls. We've been flooded with people wanting to contribute, to fly more groups down to different states. So the idea is, yes, we want to do more. The little bit we're doing will never be enough, but we should do everything we can. So we fly again from Mumbai to Ranchi on Sunday, and we'll keep going.
Okay, all the best to you, गहलोत जी। धन्यवाद जो आप हमारे साथ आज जुड़े, एंड शेल त्रेयान to you and your entire team, entire group of people, all the best, you know, in these initiatives and the projects that you are taking to help people out. Inspiring stories, really heartwarming stories, viewers, from a farmer to a bunch of lawyers to actors, you know, and athletes who are stepping and going out of their way to help people on the ground. We need more of this. Our governments are supposed to do their job, but in many ways are struggling and failing. So let's do our own bit and ensure that we are able to help more of the people who are otherwise part of our daily lives. These are the people who run our cities. These are the people who pretty much, you know, support our own lives and our lifestyle. So why should we not, in their time of need, do what we can? Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of The Urban Debate.